Your finger hovers over the mouse and the chart is quiet in that way that makes noise in your head. You know the plan, the rules, the risk, yet a warm pulse climbs from your chest to your hand and whispers, just this once. The candle nudges your level and suddenly it feels personal. You widen the stop by a tick. You shave a profit early. You enter late to catch what you already missed. The loss is small, the story is large, and the damage is invisible until the week is over. Is the market beating you, or are you doing the beating? Are you analyzing, or are you negotiating with your own chemistry? The real cost is not a single red trade. It is the slow leak of agency, the quiet erosion of trust between you and your system. Today, we make that leakage visible. We will map the hidden mechanisms that pull you off plan, show you how to interrupt them in real time, and give you simple drills to make winning feel safe. Stay to the end for a clear roadmap you can follow week by week to build a mind that trades on purpose today. Mind over Markets exists to help you engineer execution, not chase hype. Here, we translate trading psychology into actions you can take at the keyboard. In this episode, we study a source video about self-sabotage in trading and extract what is reliable in the transcript. Every claim you hear will be grounded in that text. When something is missing, we will mark an evidence gap and keep the line honest. The goal is simple. You will leave with language you can use during a trade, checkpoints you can run after a trade, and rehearsal routines you can run before a trade. Expect clear steps, plain words, and repetition that build skill. We will map the hidden mechanics, then install small habits that make winning feel safe and losing feel bearable. No slogans, no fluff, just a blueprint you can test this week and a channel plan you can follow. Here is the core thesis in plain words. Most trading failure is not caused by the market, but by invisible habits in your own mind that separate what you know from what you do at the screen. You can feel the split between plan and action in small moments when a rule bends by a hair and the day still feels logical, yet the account slowly drifts toward familiar ground. The source video frames this as self-sabotage. In this analysis, we translate that idea into clear mechanisms you can recognize while you trade and into counter moves you can practice. The point is not to blame yourself. The point is to make what is quiet and automatic become visible and adjustable. The context matters. The source material looks at the mental game through a practical lens. Markets do not adapt to your needs. They present opportunity and risk without mercy or malice. When your personal reality bleeds into that impersonal stream, decisions change shape. That bleed is where self-sabotage lives. It is quiet because each decision is easy to justify. It is insidious because the consequences add up slowly. It matters because consistency depends on repeatable actions, not on intense spurts of will. Your brain prefers safety and familiarity. Your edge prefers patience and rules. Those priorities clash unless you deliberately train them to cooperate. The first pattern to name is the reality merge error. There is market reality, which is indifferent and statistical, and there is personal reality, which is full of moods, storylines, and current pressures. When these merge, you feel as if the chart is reacting to you. You widen a stop to avoid the feeling of being wrong. You take partial profits to soothe the tension in your chest. The decision feels smart in the moment. Later, you see it did not match the setup or the plan. A simple diagnostic is this. If you notice a need to explain to yourself why this time is different, the merge has likely begun. A leverage point is to pause, read one short rule aloud, and either execute exactly or skip. That tiny ritual separates the two realities. Another pattern is the emotional spike that turns analysis into negotiation. A spike can come from fear, from frustration, or even from pleasure. You feel a surge and your inner language changes. You stop asking what the market is doing and start asking what it will let you get away with. Negotiation shows up as bending entries, chasing after a miss, or fighting to get back to flat. A clean diagnostic is noticing any urge to talk to the market in your head. When you hear yourself say things like, "let me just," you are already negotiating. The leverage point is a brief reset protocol. Shift your eyes to the room, slow your breath, read the rule card, and wait 1 full minute before the next input. A further pattern is the unconscious override. You have rules and structure, yet under pressure, your hands make a different choice. Later, you can describe the logic, but if you replay the moment, you will hear a feeling speaking as if it were reason. This is not weakness. It is how the brain saves time under stress. Old patterns vote fast. The diagnostic is repetition of the same mistake despite knowledge. When you have said, "I know this already," and still do it, the override is active. The leverage point is an if-then plan that is written and kept in view. If this specific feeling appears, then I do this specific small action. You are not trying to win a debate. You are giving your body a short path it can follow without negotiation. There is also an identity ceiling. You may think of yourself as someone who can win, but deep down you hold a range of results that feel normal. When you rise above that range, risk tolerance expands or rules loosen until you land back in the familiar zone. This is not a moral issue. It is the brain protecting a story that keeps you feeling like you. The diagnostic is the equity curve that rubber bands to a baseline after a strong run. The leverage point is to practice success at a size that feels safe until your nervous system treats calm profitability as ordinary. Small wins, repeated often, install a new ceiling without triggering defense. Micro-betrayals deserve attention. These are tiny, reasonable choices that tilt expectation. You skip an entry and jump into the next candle because you want to be involved. You nudge a stop to avoid a scratch that feels like failure. You cut a winner because seeing green feels too vulnerable. None of these break the plan in a dramatic way. Each feels responsible. In aggregate, they erase weeks of progress. The diagnostic is language like "just this once" and "it is not a big deal." The leverage point is a one-line rule. If I use the phrase "just this once," I stop and either pass the trade or execute the original plan with full compliance. Home base bias shows up when your account keeps drifting toward the same level regardless of recent performance. When you start to build momentum, doubt rises or you grow reckless. When you are down, you press and dig deeper. The nervous system prefers familiar numbers over the unknown. The diagnostic is to mark your account levels each week and notice how often you end in a narrow band. The leverage point is to define a new normal in writing and to change size for a cycle so that your behavior cannot easily drag you back to the old baseline. Winning streak snapback is counterintuitive, but common. The problem is not handling loss. The problem is holding success without self-defense. After a string of wins, you raise risk to feel more alive, or switch methods because the wins do not feel earned. You are trying to get rid of an unsafe state. The diagnostic is rule erosion that begins only after outperformance. The leverage point is to pre-commit to a cool-down after a hot run. Trade smaller for a set number of sessions. Rehearse comfort with boring competence. Teach your body that ease is not a threat. Memory skew is another quiet saboteur. You remember bad trades in sharp detail and forget good ones. The brain does this to prevent future pain, but the effect is that wins do not become part of your identity. You keep walking into the day as if you have to prove yourself from nothing. The diagnostic is a journal full of critique and thin on reinforcement. The leverage point is to record 3 specifics about what you did well after each session. You are not flattering yourself. You are building accurate memory of skillful behavior so your future self can trust it. Discipline camouflage is trickier. You can follow a plan and still choose contexts that drain expectancy. You pick the busiest times when your edge lives in quiet hours. You trade the asset that moves the most when your data shows you perform best in moderate conditions. It looks like discipline because you obey rules, but selection bias eats your edge. The diagnostic is shrinking equity despite plan compliance. The leverage point is to audit conditions along with entries. Tag trades with volatility, time of day, and structure. Remove the contexts where a compliant trade still loses across weeks. Deep scripts often predate trading, Beliefs about money and success come from family patterns and early experiences. If money was tied to conflict or guilt, consistent profit can feel wrong. If you grew up in chaos, calm markets may feel dull, and you may unconsciously seek drama. The diagnostic is an emotional charge around certain P&L numbers or repeated sabotage at the same milestones. The leverage point is gentle inquiry in writing. Finish sentences like, "In my family money meant," and "successful people were," and "my role was." You are not hunting for blame. You are naming scripts so they can loosen. There are more subtle forms. Over-preparation can disguise avoidance. You keep tuning the plan instead of placing the next small trade. Comfort in chaos can become a strategy. You act only when the chart is wild, not because that is your edge, but because the intensity feels like home. Fear of visibility may surface as reluctance to share results or seek mentorship. Narrative protection shows up as elegant excuses that preserve ego but block improvement. The diagnostic across these is simple. If effort is high and forward motion is low, a subtle form is likely active. The leverage point is to choose one behavior you can change this week that produces a measurable result and commit to it in writing. Breaking the cycle begins with awareness, but awareness alone is a museum tour. You need interrupts that change state in the moment and repetitions that make the new path easy to walk. The aim is to make success feel safe and ordinary. Detach your sense of self from the outcome of a single trade so you can execute the process without needing comfort from the result. Each mechanism above offers a place to push. Choose one, design a tiny action you can repeat, and track it. The source video offers notable lines that point to these ideas. It highlights that the market does not care about your feelings. It points to the mind negotiating instead of analyzing during spikes. It describes how the unconscious mind can override plans and still feel rational. It connects identity to outcome by noting that people act to match self-image. Even if your transcript does not include exact phrasing for every mechanism, the patterns echo across sections of the text. Where a specific claim is not present, treat it as an evidence gap and keep your application narrow until you can confirm. There are limits to keep in mind. If you are in acute distress or experiencing compulsive behavior, you may need professional support beyond trading routines. Also, some edges demand specific condition filters that this analysis cannot infer from the transcript. Finally, any change that touches identity can create backlash. Expect it. Plan for it. Use smaller size while you install new habits so that learning is paid for with time and attention rather than equity. What matters most is that you can name what is happening while it is happening. When you hear negotiation in your inner voice, you now have a reset. When you see a micro-betrayal rise, you now have a rule sentence that stops it. When you feel a ceiling after wins, you now have a plan to make success boring and safe. That is the bridge from knowledge to execution. That is the core of self-mastery in the market. You need protocols you can run in the moment. Insight is not enough. Skill is a behavior you can repeat under pressure. We will build a small set of routines that change your state quickly, steer your actions toward the plan, and give you proof that the change is real. You will know they work because you can count them. Keep the language simple, keep the steps short, keep the wins small until they feel safe. Your aim is not to feel inspired. Your aim is to install control where the sabotage used to live. Begin with a 90-second state reset. When you feel a surge of fear, frustration, or thrill, you will interrupt physiology first, then attention, then rules. Sit tall with both feet on the floor. Inhale through the nose for a slow count of 4. Hold for a count of 2. Exhale through the mouth for a slow count of 6. Repeat this cycle 3 times. Shift your eyes to soft focus and name 3 colors in the room. Name 3 sounds you can hear. Place your gaze on a single object for 1 breath. Now read 1 line from your rule card out loud in a calm voice. Set your cursor aside and wait 1 full minute before any new input. This protocol keeps you from negotiating with the market while your chemistry is loud. Track how many spikes you interrupt. Aim to hit 8 out of 10 within 2 weeks and keep the streak going. Install micro-wins conditioning. Trade your smallest viable size for a fixed block of sessions. Define a micro-win as a trade that meets entry, risk, and exit rules with no edits after entry. You are not chasing dollars here. You are teaching your nervous system that calm, rule-based execution equals safety. At the end of each session, write 2 sentences about one behavior you did well and one behavior you will repeat tomorrow. When you string together 10 sessions with rule-consistent micro-wins, you will notice that boredom begins to feel like home. That is the point. Boring is the new signal that you are on track. Unhook identity from outcomes. After every trade, run a short debrief that uses neutral, process-based language. Replace labels about yourself with descriptions of actions. Instead of saying that you are reckless, say that you moved a stop without a rule. Instead of saying that you are careful, say that you followed risk per trade and closed at the planned level. Keep a running tally of self-labels you use in the journal. Your goal is to bring that number down to 0 and replace each label with a specific behavior note plus one small adjustment for the next session. This keeps your sense of self stable while you learn, so a red trade does not trigger defense and a green trade does not trigger risk creep. Map triggers and pre-commit actions. Write down the 5 most common moments that tilt you off plan. Examples include a missed entry, a sudden move in your favor, a sharp loss after open, a day with no setups, or a social media headline that raises your pulse. For each trigger, write a single sentence that begins with the words if and then so that your future self has a script. If I miss an entry, then I wait for the next valid setup and I do not chase. If I take a sharp loss, then I reduce size to the smallest level for the next trade. Put these sentences on a card near your screen. Read the relevant one out loud when the trigger hits. Count how often you follow the then action. Work toward an adherence rate above 80%. Build an accountability stack that makes progress visible. Keep a daily journal that includes 3 parts. A pre-session intention in 1 or 2 lines. A mid-session checkpoint after your first trade. A post-session debrief that names one thing you did well, one thing you will change, and one line that states the rule you protected today. Once a week, review your last 5 sessions with a peer or mentor. Share screenshots and the short notes. Agree on 2 adjustments for the next week. Put the next review on the calendar. When another person expects to see your process, your brain has a reason to prepare beyond emotion. Practice excuse extension. At the end of any session with a frustrating result, write 2 sentences that begin with, I caused this and I will solve this. Being honest about your role is not self-blame, it is power. List the internal actions that led to the outcome and the smallest controllable action you will take tomorrow. Fold in a constraint that makes the solution cheap. If you broke a stop, commit to trading the smallest size for the next 3 trades. If you chased, commit to skipping the next setup that would tempt you to chase. Keep a visible count of days where your debrief has no external excuses. Watch that number rise week by week. Reduce friction so the routines actually happen. Keep a rule card on your desk in large fonts with only the 5 lines that matter most. Set a simple timer on your platform that can block inputs for 1 minute during a reset. Place a sticky note that says breathe and read in the corner of your monitor. Prepare a small checklist for pre-session priming. It can be as light as read rules, mark levels, test hotkeys, confirm size, visualize the first reset. Use the first 10 minutes after session to write your 2-line debrief before you check messages or charts. The easier the first step, the more often you will take it. Watch for common failure modes and plan for them. You may skip the reset when you are green because you do not want to lose momentum. You may turn journaling into another form of procrastination. You may tighten rules after a loss so much that you cannot execute at all. The antidote is pre-committed size and duration. Decide size bands in advance and keep them for a full cycle regardless of win or loss. Decide how many days you will practice micro-wins before you review size. Decide when you will trade and when you will stop, and obey those fences. This is how you protect learning while your identity catches up. The final aim of this playbook is not perfection. It is a shift in default. You want the reset to happen before you think about it, the micro win to feel like the normal step, the debrief to sound like a coach who respects you, the trigger script to speak before the urge can bargain. Keep the words short, the moves small, and the counts honest. When you can say that you ran the reset after most spikes, that you stacked the run of rule-sized wins, that your journal shows fewer self-labels and more clear actions, you will know that sabotage is losing its grip and execution is becoming who you are. Mind over markets is a quiet room in a noisy field. The promise is simple. We turn psychology into execution, and we do it with clarity, repetition, and proof. The strategy for the channel reflects that promise. Every episode must give the viewer a decision they can rehearse, a sentence they can say at the desk, and a way to know that it worked. Or NUS-Neural 2K. Or the first pillar is a series on deep mechanics. These episodes explain the patterns that quietly steer behavior. One explores the shift from analysis to negotiation and shows how a spike of fear or pleasure alters inner language and pushes rules aside. Another maps the identity thermostat and explains why equity curves often return to a familiar baseline, then teaches a way to normalize safe success through small wins at modest size. A third studies winning streak fragility and gives a recovery plan that lowers size and slows tempo after outperformance so the body learns that ease is allowed. A fourth exposes micro-betrayals, those tiny edits at entry and exit that feel sensible yet erode expectancy. And it trains a one-line stop phrase the viewer can use in the moment. A fifth breaks down equity home base bias, turning weekly account reviews into a gentle method for setting a new normal. A sixth corrects memory skew by teaching the viewer to imprint specific wins so the brain can trust its own data instead of doom stories. The second pillar is a practice lab that turns ideas into drills. Each practice episode follows a steady pattern. We open with a short framing story, then move straight into a guided exercise the viewer can copy in real time. One session installs the 90-second state reset with breathing, soft focus, and a rule card. Another builds micro wins by asking the viewer to trade the smallest viable size for a fixed block of days and to record 2 lines after each session that reinforce specific behaviors. Another unhooks identity from profit and loss by replenishing self-labels with neutral action descriptions during debriefs. Another walks through a trigger map sprint where the viewer writes 5 if-then lines and rehearses them out loud before a live session. We close each practice video with a proof of change cue, like a target for adherence rate or streak count, so progress is tangible and the viewer knows what success looks like. The third pillar goes beyond sabotage and builds a resilient trading mind. These episodes teach patience as a skill, show how to design focus by removing cognitive clutter, and bridge the gap between what you know and what you do with small fences around time, risk, and method. We explore sustainable boredom as a virtue, where a session feels like brushing your teeth, simple and repeatable. We develop a language for attention, like calling out inner negotiation when it arises and returning to neutral with the reset. We also touch on the deep roots without turning the channel into therapy, inviting viewers to journal about early money stories and to notice where those stories color risk and reward today. Production choices support the psychology. Keep the visual field clean with light backgrounds, soft edges, and clear overlays that show a rule card, a habit loop, or an identity thermostat when named. Use brief cutaways to hands on the keyboard, a journal line being written, or a simple breathing graphic that paces the viewer through a reset. Music sits low and steady. The voice carries calm energy and leaves space after key lines so the viewer can act along with the script. Lower thirds can introduce terms the first time they appear and then get out of the way. The aim is modest elegance that makes the content feel safe to practice. Engagement is designed, not left to chance. Each deep mechanics video ends with a prompt that asks the viewer to type one sentence about the rule they will protect this week and to report back next episode.
Practice lab videos invite viewers to pause and perform the drill live, then drop a single-line metric in the comments, such as how many spikes they interrupted or how many micro-wins they logged.
Regular features include case files where we anonymize a trader's story and walk through the mechanism and the repair, and journal spotlights where we read 2 lines from a viewer who gave consent and point to 1 improvement for the coming week. We also host periodic office hours where comments guide a focused session on a single friction point, like chasing after a miss or risk creep after wins. Cadence matters. Keep 2 releases each week. One day delivers deep mechanics, the other runs a practice lab. Every 4th week, rotate in a Beyond Sabotage episode or a case file special. Keep runtime steady. Track retention, click-through, comments that show application, and how many viewers report using the metrics in real time. Here is the shape of what you just learned. The market is indifferent, your nervous system is protective, and the gap between the two is where sabotage grows. You can close that gap. Name the pattern, interrupt the spike, rehearse the smallest correct move, and let boring competence feel safe. Your account does not need heroics. It needs repeatable behaviors that survive pressure. Today, you saw how reality merges, how emotion invites negotiation, how old scripts steer your hands, and how identity drags results back to a familiar baseline. You also saw levers you can pull in real time. Breathe, widen your awareness, raid the rule, wait 1 minute, execute or skip. Trade tiny until wins feel ordinary. Debrief with neutral language so outcomes stop defining you. Map 5 triggers and pre-commit 1 clear action for each. Build gentle accountability with a weekly review. Now choose 1 protocol and use it in your next session. Then come back and tell us the smallest rule you protected and the number of spikes you interrupted. If this helped, subscribe for the next practice session and share this with a trader who needs clarity. Mind Over Markets is here when you are ready.